I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Grandma, my parents are sending you to a nursing home today, my 8-year-old granddaughter Zaria whispered to me, her warm breath tickling my ear as she hugged me tightly. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten and my hands instinctively gripped the armrests of my faded blue armchair, the one Ronan had bought me for our 20th anniversary. The afternoon sun streamed through my lace curtains, creating dancing patterns on the worn carpet beneath us. Just moments earlier, everything had seemed so peaceful. "What did you hear, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I pulled back to look at her innocent face. "Mommy said you're getting too old to live alone and that it's too expensive to keep taking care of you." Zaria replied matter-of-factly, the way children repeat things they don't fully understand. "Nyeh. Daddy said the place has visiting hours on Sundays." My mind reeled. I stared at this precious child who had just delivered news that shattered everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my son. Phoenix had been distant since Ronan's death 5 years ago, but I never imagined he saw me as such a burden. "Are you okay, Grandma?" Zaria asked, her bright eyes studying my face. "You look sad." I forced a smile, though my heart was breaking. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just thinking." But I wasn't fine. Memories flooded back of Phoenix as a little boy, running to me when he scraped his knee, asking me to read him stories before bed. When had that loving child turned into someone who could plot to ship his own mother away without even telling her I thought about Bellamy, my daughter-in-law, with her perfectly styled hair and designer clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget? She'd made it clear from the beginning that she didn't approve of Phoenix's overly close relationship with his mother. Every family dinner became a subtle battlefield, with Bellamy making comments about how I was set in my ways or how Phoenix worried about me too much. "We should get you ready, sweetheart," I told Zaria, gently moving her off my lap. "Your parents will be here soon." As Zaria gathered her toys, I walked to my bedroom on unsteady legs. My reflection in the dresser mirror showed a woman who looked every bit of her 66 years, gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, wrinkles mapping years of worry and joy. No wonder they saw me as a burden. I opened my jewelry box, the one Ronan had carved for me in his workshop. My fingers found the small key hidden beneath the velvet lining. After Ronan's death, I'd told Phoenix that his father had left very little money. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The front door opened, and I heard Bellamy's voice, sharp and impatient. "Zaria, get your things. We need to go." I closed the jewelry box quickly and walked back to the living room. Phoenix stood by the door, not meeting my eyes. He'd inherited his father's height, but none of his warmth. Bellamy checked her phone, clearly eager to leave. "Thanks for watching her, Mom," Phoenix said, his voice strained. "We'll talk soon." The way he said it, with that forced casualness, confirmed everything Zaria had told me. I kissed my granddaughter goodbye, holding her a little longer than usual. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know." After they left, I stood in the silence of my small house. The walls seemed to close in around me. Photographs of Phoenix at various ages stared back at me from every surface. Birthday parties, graduation, his wedding. Had I been fooling myself all these years, thinking we still had a relationship? My phone buzzed with a text from Phoenix. "Mom, we need to talk. Are you home?" I stared at the message. So, it was beginning. They'd probably already called the nursing home, made all the arrangements, in their minds. I was probably just sitting in my armchair, waiting helplessly for whatever decision they'd made about my future. My phone buzzed again, this time from Bellamy. Clarice, Kurt is worried about you. Please call us back. Worried, right? They were worried about their timeline being disrupted, worried that I might somehow complicate their plans. I looked around at the home I'd built with Ronan over 30 years. Every corner held memories: the kitchen where we'd dance while washing dishes, the backyard where Phoenix had taken his first steps, the workshop where Ronan had spent countless hours tinkering with his inventions. No, I wouldn't sit here waiting for them to come collect me like an unwanted piece of furniture. I would not be discarded so easily. 20 minutes later, I stood at my front door with a small suitcase, my coat, and purse. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here waiting for them to come for me. The afternoon air was crisp as I walked down the street I'd called home for 3 decades. Neighbors waved from their porches, unaware that they might be seeing old Marcella Thorne for the last time. At least, the version of Marcella they thought they knew. I reached the bus stop and sat on the worn bench. When the city bus arrived, I climbed aboard without looking back. The driver, a kind-faced woman about my age, smiled at me. "Where to, honey?" "Downtown," I said simply. "First National Bank." As the bus pulled away from my neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not sadness or fear, but a strange sense of liberation. Phoenix and Bellamy thought they knew who I was. They thought they could dispose of me quietly, neatly. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The bus rumbled through familiar streets, past the grocery store where I'd shopped for decades, past the church where Ronan and I had been married. I wasn't the helpless old woman they believed me to be. I'd been protecting them from the truth for 5 years, living modestly, letting them think I was barely scraping by. It was time for that to change. I thought back to that day 5 years ago when Dr. Peterson had called with Ronan's test results. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months. If we were lucky, Ronan had gripped my hand in that sterile office and made me promise something. Don't tell Phoenix about the patents. Marcella, not yet. Let him build his own life first. Ronan had been a quiet man, a tinkerer who spent hours in our garage workshop. While I raised Phoenix and managed our household, Ronan invented small things at first: an improved can opener, a better door hinge, a more efficient sprinkler head. He'd file the patents himself, never expecting much. But then came the automatic pet feeder. It started when our neighbor's dog kept getting into our garbage. Ronan designed a simple mechanism that would dispense food at set times, keeping animals on schedule. He built a prototype in our garage and thought nothing more of it until PetSmart contacted him. I remembered the day the first royalty check arrived, $12,000 for a single quarter. Ronan had stared at it for an hour before showing it to me. "Marcella, I think we might have something here." We did have something. Over the next 15 years, Ronan's patents generated steady income that we invested carefully: real estate in emerging neighborhoods, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds. Nothing flashy, nothing that would attract attention. When Phoenix graduated college and moved in with Bellamy, Ronan and I made a decision. We would live simply, modestly, the same way we always had. Phoenix needed to learn independence, to build his own success without relying on his parents' money. If he knows we're wealthy, he'll never know what he's truly capable of. Ronan had said, "And that woman he's dating, she'll never love him for who he is." Bellamy. Even then, Ronan had seen through her charm. She'd grown up in privilege, and her interest in Phoenix had seemed to spike when she learned he was an engineer with good prospects. If she'd known about Ronan's patents, about the investments that had grown quietly in the background, I shuddered to think what might have happened. After Ronan's diagnosis, the patents continued generating income, but I honored his wishes and kept the secret. Phoenix was building his career, trying to prove himself. I lived on a small portion of the investment income and let the rest accumulate. When I walked into First National Bank 30 minutes later, I approached the same teller window I'd visited every month for years. But instead of making my usual small withdrawal, I asked to speak with a manager. I need to access my safety deposit boxes, I told the young man in the expensive suit. All of them. The bank manager, a polished man named Mr. Davidson, led me through the vault's heavy doors. His demeanor had shifted completely when he saw my account information. The difference in his voice was something I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Respect. Mrs. Thorne, we haven't seen you in quite some time, he said, inserting his key alongside mine in the first safety deposit box. I trust everything has been satisfactory with your accounts. Perfectly satisfactory, I replied, lifting the metal box from its slot. Inside lay documents that told a story Phoenix had never known, a truth I'd buried alongside his father. Now sitting in the bank's private conference room with my safety deposit boxes spread before me, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Mr. Davidson had discreetly stepped out to give me privacy. I opened the manila folder that contained my current financial statements, $17,200,000. The number still shocked me even though I'd watched it grow slowly over the years. Ronan's automatic pet feeder had spawned a series of related patents: timed dispensers for medications, automated plant watering systems, programmable bird feeders. Each patent generated royalties that I'd reinvested faithfully. My phone buzzed. A text from Phoenix. "Mom, we need to talk. Are you home?" I stared at the message. So, it was beginning. They'd probably already called the nursing home, made arrangements in their minds. I was probably just sitting in my armchair, waiting helplessly for whatever decision they'd made about my future. I thought about Zaria's innocent face, the way she tried to warn me. That sweet child was the only reason I'd maintained any relationship with Phoenix and Bellamy at all. Over the years, I'd watched Bellamy's true nature emerge, the way she dismissed Phoenix's concerns about his father's illness, how she'd forgotten to invite me to Zaria's birthday parties until the last minute, the subtle ways she'd poisoned Phoenix against me. "Your mother is so needy," I'd overheard her tell Phoenix once. "She calls you constantly. You need to set boundaries." But I hadn't called constantly. I'd called maybe once a week, and even then, I could hear the impatience in Phoenix's voice. Bellamy had been systematically driving a wedge between us, and Phoenix had been too blind to see it. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Bellamy. "Marcella, Phoenix is worried about you. Please call us back." Worried, right? They were worried about their timeline being disrupted. Worried that I might somehow complicate their plans. I pulled out another document from the safety deposit box. Ronan's will. The real one that our lawyer had prepared. Phoenix had never seen this version. The copy I'd shown him after the funeral had been carefully edited, showing only our modest checking account and the house. This will told a different story. It outlined every patent, every investment, every carefully hidden asset. Ronan had left everything to me, with instructions that it should eventually go to Phoenix and Zaria. But there had been a condition. Only when Marcella determines that Phoenix has the wisdom and character to handle such responsibility. I'd been waiting 5 years for that wisdom to emerge. Instead, I'd watched my son become increasingly distant, increasingly influenced by a woman who saw family as an inconvenience. The bank's phone on the conference table rang softly. Mr. Davidson's voice came through the intercom. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a young man here asking about you. Says he's your son." My heart sank. Somehow Phoenix had figured out where I'd gone. "Tell him I'm in a meeting and cannot be disturbed." Of course, ma'am. I gathered the documents quickly and placed them back in the safety deposit box. But I kept one item, a small notebook where Ronan had recorded every patent application, every royalty payment, every investment decision. His handwriting filled page after page with the meticulous records of a man building a legacy. On the last page, in Ronan's familiar script, was a note dated just weeks before his death. For Marcella, you'll know when it's time to tell the truth. Trust your instincts. Our granddaughter deserves better than we had, and Phoenix deserves the chance to be the man I know he can be. But some lessons can only be learned the hard way. I closed the notebook and slipped it into my purse. Through the conference room's small window, I could see Phoenix in the bank's main lobby, running his hands through his hair in frustration. He was talking to a teller, probably trying to find out what I was doing here. Part of me wanted to walk out there and tell him everything, to explain that his father had been a brilliant inventor, that we'd built a fortune specifically for his and Zaria's future, to show him that I wasn't the helpless burden he'd come to see me as. But Ronan's words echoed in my mind. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Phoenix had made his choice. He'd chosen Bellamy's influence over his own mother's well-being. He'd chosen to see me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be cherished. Now I would make my choice. I gathered my coat and purse, leaving the safety deposit boxes secured in their vault. When I emerged from the conference room, Phoenix was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Davidson approached me with a slight smile. Your son left a few minutes ago. He seemed quite frustrated. Is there anything else we can help you with today? Mrs. Thorne. I thought for a moment. Yes, actually, I'll need to set up some new accounts, and I'll need to speak with someone about estate planning. His eyebrows rose slightly. Of course. Shall I schedule an appointment for later this week? No, I said firmly. Today, I have some important decisions to make. The Grandview Hotel wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet. And most importantly, it was only 3 miles from Phoenix's house. From my corner room on the 3rd floor, I could see the neighborhood where I'd raised my son, where my granddaughter was probably wondering why Grandma had disappeared. It had been 2 days since I'd left the bank with a new checkbook and a plan that was still forming in my mind. 2 days of Phoenix calling my house phone over and over, leaving increasingly frantic messages that I listened to from the hotel's business center. Mom, where are you? We need to talk. Mom, please call me back. I'm worried. Bellamy is really worried about you. I almost laughed at that last part. Bellamy worried about me the way a cat worries about a mouse, only concerned about when it might escape. I'd spent yesterday meeting with Wren Blackwood, the private investigator that Mr. Davidson had recommended. Wren was a small woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and an unassuming manner that probably made people underestimate her. Perfect for what I needed. I want to know everything about my daughter-in-law's spending habits, daily routines, friendships, her activities when my son isn't around. I told her. And I want to know about their financial situation, the real situation. Wren had nodded without judgment. How deep do you want me to dig? All the way to bedrock. Now I sat in my hotel room waiting for her first report while watching the local news. A story about elder abuse caught my attention, and I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. Is that what I was? An elderly woman being abused by her own family. My phone rang. Wren's number. Mrs. Thorne, I have some preliminary information you might find interesting. What did you find? Your son and daughter-in-law are in significant debt. Credit cards maxed out. Second mortgage on the house. Car payments on 2 luxury vehicles they can't afford. But that's not the most concerning part. I gripped the phone tighter. What is, your daughter-in-law has been researching nursing homes for the past 6 months. Not nice ones. The cheapest facilities she could find. some with serious violations from the state health department. The room seemed to spin around me. 6 months. This hadn't been a sudden decision born of concern for my welfare. This had been a calculated plan. There's more, Wren continued. She's been telling neighbors that you're becoming increasingly confused and difficult to manage, creating a narrative that would justify their decision. I closed my eyes, remembering the strange looks I'd gotten from Mrs. Patterson next door last week, the way she'd spoken to me slower and louder than usual, as if I were a child. What about my granddaughter? That's where it gets worse. From what I've observed, the child is largely ignored, left to fend for herself while your daughter-in-law shops and your son works overtime trying to keep up with their expenses. My heart clenched. Poor Zaria, trapped in a house where money mattered more than people. After hanging up with Wren, I sat staring at the hotel room's beige walls. Ronan had been right to keep our wealth secret, but he'd overestimated Phoenix's character. My son had grown into someone who could plan to discard his own mother for financial convenience. I opened Ronan's notebook again, running my fingers over his careful handwriting. On one page, he'd written, "The automatic pet feeder patent alone should provide for 3 generations, but money without wisdom is just another burden." Wisdom. That's what Phoenix lacked, and what Bellamy had never possessed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood turned cold. "Grandma, are you okay? Mommy says you're sick and had to go to the doctor. I miss you. Love, Zaria." They were lying to my granddaughter, making her worry that something was wrong with me while they plotted to institutionalize me. I called Wren back immediately. "I need you to document everything. I want proof of their financial situation, proof of how they're treating Zaria, proof of every lie they're telling. Mrs. Thorne, are you planning legal action?" "I'm planning to protect my granddaughter, whatever that takes." That evening, I drove my rental car through my old neighborhood. The house Ronan and I had shared for 30 years sat dark and empty. Phoenix's house, 2 streets over, glowed with warm light. I parked across the street and watched. Through the large front window, I could see Bellamy on her phone, gesticulating wildly. Phoenix sat slumped on the couch, his head in his hands. No sign of Zaria. A few minutes later, Bellamy threw her phone down and stormed out of the room. Phoenix remained on the couch, not moving. Even from a distance, I could see the defeat in his posture. My phone rang. Phoenix's number. "Mom, please answer this time. I know you're upset about something, but we can work it out. Bellamy found some really nice places where you'd be comfortable and safe." Safe from what? From living independently in the house I'd called home for decades. From making my own decisions about my own life. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched as he hung up and threw his own phone aside. A light came on in an upstairs window. Zaria's room. I could see her small silhouette moving around, probably getting ready for bed. My heart ached to go to her, to tell her that Grandma was fine and that someone was watching out for her. Bellamy reappeared in the living room, carrying a laptop. She set it on the coffee table and opened it, angling the screen toward Phoenix. Even from across the street, I could see them looking at what were obviously websites. Nursing home websites. They were shopping for my future like they were browsing for a new appliance. Phoenix pointed at something on the screen and shook his head. Bellamy pointed at something else, more insistent. They were arguing about price. I realized about how cheaply they could dispose of me. I started the car and drove away before I did something I'd regret. Back at the hotel, I called Wren again. "I need you to accelerate your investigation, and I need you to look into legal options for protecting my granddaughter." "What kind of legal options?" "I want to know what it would take to get custody of her, or at least guaranteed visitation rights that can't be revoked. There was a pause. Mrs. Thorne, that's a significant step. Are you sure? I thought about Zaria's face when she'd warned me about the nursing home, about the text message saying she missed me, about the light in her bedroom window, a little girl probably wondering why the adults in her life kept disappearing. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning brought Wren's full report, 20 pages of financial records, photographs, and documented conversations that painted a picture of a family in crisis. Phoenix and Bellamy owed over $200,000 in various debts. The house I'd helped them buy with a secret gift of $50,000 for the down payment was mortgaged to the hilt. Bellamy's shopping addiction had spiraled out of control, and Phoenix was working 70-hour weeks to try to keep them afloat. But the most damning evidence was the timeline Wren had constructed. The nursing home research had begun immediately after they'd received a property tax notice on my house. They'd realized that my modest home was worth nearly $400,000 in the current market. They weren't just trying to get rid of a burden. They were planning to sell my house to solve their financial problems. The final page of Wren's report contained information about Zaria's daily routine. Up at 6:30, makes her own breakfast while parents sleep in. Walks to school alone because Bellamy can't be bothered to drive her. Spends afternoons at the neighbor's house because no one is home when school ends. My granddaughter was raising herself. I closed the report and reached for my phone. It was time to call my lawyer. Richard, this is Marcella Thorne. I need to see you today. It's urgent. Of course, Marcella. What's this about? I need to protect my granddaughter from her own parents, and I think it's time they learned exactly who they've been planning to throw away. That afternoon, I sat across from Wren in my hotel room, going through the latest updates. There's something you need to see right away, she said, opening her laptop. Your daughter-in-law met with a lawyer yesterday, a specialist in elder care and conservatorship proceedings. My blood turned cold. What does that mean? It means they're preparing to have you declared mentally incompetent if you don't comply with their nursing home plan. They're building a case that you're suffering from dementia or some other cognitive decline that makes you unable to care for yourself. I sank into the window seat, looking across the cityscape toward the neighborhood where my granddaughter was probably doing her homework alone while her parents plotted my legal destruction. There's more, Wren continued. The lawyer advised them to document instances of your erratic behavior. They're going to start creating a paper trail that paints you as confused and potentially dangerous to yourself. How do you know all this? The lawyer's secretary is my cousin. She's horrified by what she overheard and wanted someone to warn you. I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of their betrayal. This wasn't just about money anymore. They were prepared to destroy my reputation, my autonomy, my very identity to get what they wanted. Mrs. Thorne, are you still there? Yes, I said quietly. I'm here. And Wren? Yes. Tomorrow morning, I want you to schedule a meeting with Phoenix and Bellamy. Tell them I'm ready to come home and discuss their concerns about my living situation. Are you sure that's wise after what I just told you? I stood up and walked to the window, picturing Zaria in her bedroom, trying to maintain some semblance of childhood normalcy in a house dominated by greed and neglect. They think they're dealing with a confused old woman who doesn't understand what's happening to her, I said. It's time they learned exactly who they've been underestimating. Richard Casimir had been Ronan's lawyer for over 20 years, a distinguished man with silver hair and the kind of quiet competence that comes from handling family fortunes for decades. When I walked into his mahogany-paneled office, he stood with the same respect he'd always shown me, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. Marcella, I have to admit I'm intrigued by your call. You sounded quite determined. I placed Ren's investigation report on his desk alongside Ronan's notebook. Richard, I need you to know something that I've kept hidden for 5 years. Ronan didn't leave me nearly as poor as everyone believes. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he remained silent as I opened the notebook to the final tally of our assets. $17,200,000, I said quietly. That's what Ronan's patents and our investments are worth today. Richard's composure cracked for just a moment. In all his years of handling wealthy clients, I could see that this revelation had caught him completely off guard. Marcella, I handled Ronan's estate. The will I probated showed what I wanted it to show. The version you filed was real, but it didn't include the patents or the investment accounts. Those were in my name only, by Ronan's design. I explained everything, then Ronan's decision to keep our wealth secret. My 5 years of living modestly while watching Phoenix build his own life. And now the devastating discovery that my son and daughter-in-law were planning to institutionalize me to access my property. Richard listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair. What do you want to do, Marcella? First, I want to protect Zaria. I need to know my legal options for ensuring I can see her regularly, regardless of what her parents decide about me. That's tricky. Grandparents' rights vary by state, but if we can demonstrate that you have an established relationship with the child and that cutting off contact would harm her welfare, I can demonstrate that. 8 years of birthday parties, sleepovers, school events, I have photos, cards she's made me, everything. Good. What else? I took a deep breath. I want to buy the house next to Phoenix and Bellamy's, the one with the for sale sign. I want to be close enough to watch over Zaria without their permission. Richard made another note. That's certainly within your rights. Anything else? I want to set up a trust fund for Zaria that her parents can't touch. Something substantial that will be available when she turns 25. How substantial? $5 million? Richard's pen stopped moving. Marcella, that's nearly a third of your entire estate. Zaria is my future. Richard, she's the only person in that family who still has a pure heart. I want to make sure she never has to depend on anyone the way they're trying to make me dependent. He nodded slowly. I can draft the trust documents. Is there anything else? I hesitated, then pulled out the most difficult part of my plan. I want to make a new will, one that Phoenix and Bellamy will never expect. How so? If something happens to me before Zaria turns 18, I want her care and the management of her trust to go to my sister Patricia in Oregon. Phoenix gets nothing until he proves he can be the father and man his daughter deserves. Richard set down his pen entirely. Marcella, that's a dramatic step. You're essentially disinheriting your only child. No, I'm giving him a chance to earn his inheritance through character instead of birthright. Ronan always said money without wisdom was just another burden. Phoenix needs to learn wisdom first. And if he never does? I thought about Zaria's innocent face, about the lies they were telling her, about the nursing homes Bellamy was researching. Then Zaria will inherit everything when she turns 30. At least one person in this family will understand the value of what Ronan built. Richard spent the next hour drafting documents while I sat in his conference room, staring out at the city where I'd spent my entire adult life. It felt surreal to be making decisions about millions of dollars while my son thought I was a penniless burden. My phone buzzed. A text from Phoenix. Mom, please come home. We're all worried sick. Zaria keeps asking where you are. The mention of Zaria's name made my chest tighten. I typed back. I'm fine, taking some time to think. His response came immediately. Think about what, if this is about the nursing home discussion, We can look at other options. We just want what's best for you. I stared at the message. Even now, he couldn't bring himself to be honest. It wasn't about what was best for me. It was about what was convenient for them. The documents are ready, Richard announced, returning to the conference room with a stack of papers. The trust fund for Zaria, the new will, and I've also prepared a power of attorney that ensures no one can make medical or financial decisions for you without your explicit consent. Thank you. I signed each document carefully, my signature sealing a future that Phoenix couldn't imagine. There's one more thing, Richard said. The house next to your son's. I called the listing agent. The owners are motivated to sell quickly due to a job relocation. They'll accept a cash offer significantly below asking price. How significantly? The asking price is $485,000. They'll take $420,000 for a cash offer that can close within 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. Make the offer. An hour later, I was the owner of the house at 247 Maple Street, directly next door to my son's family. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were planning to move me into a nursing home while I was buying the house next door. That evening, I drove to my new property with the keys in my hand. It was a charming 2-story colonial with a big front porch and a backyard that connected to Phoenix's property line. From the upstairs windows, I could see directly into Zaria's bedroom. As I stood in the empty living room, I heard voices from next door. Through the thin walls, I could hear Phoenix and Bellamy arguing. She's been gone for 4 days. Phoenix, 4 days. People are starting to ask questions. I know, but what am I supposed to tell them that my mother disappeared because she found out we were planning to put her in a nursing home? You weren't supposed to let her find out. This is a disaster. I moved closer to the wall, my heart pounding. Maybe we should just drop the whole thing, Phoenix said, his voice tired. Maybe we can figure out another way to handle our finances. Are you insane? Bellamy's voice was sharp with anger. Do you know how much debt we have? Your mother's house is our only way out of this mess. If we don't sell it, we're going to lose everything. But if she's really missing, if something happened to her, nothing happened to her. She's probably staying with some friend, trying to make us worry. She'll come back when she gets tired of playing games. There was a pause, then Phoenix's voice, quieter now. What if she doesn't come back? Then we file a missing person report and eventually have her declared incompetent. Either way, we get control of her assets. I stepped back from the wall, my hands shaking. Bellamy wasn't just planning to institutionalize me. She was prepared to have me declared incompetent if I refused to cooperate. My phone rang, startling me in the empty house. Wren's number. Mrs. Thorne, I have an update you need to hear immediately. What is it? Your daughter-in-law met with a lawyer today, a lawyer who specializes in elder care and conservatorship proceedings. My blood turned cold. What does that mean? It means they're preparing to have you declared mentally incompetent if you don't comply with their nursing home plan. They're building a case that you're suffering from dementia or some other cognitive decline that makes you unable to care for yourself. I sank into the window seat, looking across the yard at the house where my granddaughter was probably doing her homework alone while her parents plotted my legal destruction. There's more, Wren continued. The lawyer advised them to document instances of your erratic behavior. They're going to start creating a paper trail that paints you as confused and potentially dangerous to yourself. How do you know all this? The lawyer's secretary is my cousin. She's horrified by what she overheard and wanted someone to warn you. I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of their betrayal. This wasn't just about money anymore. They were prepared to destroy my reputation, my autonomy, my very identity to get what they wanted. Mrs. Thorne, Are you still there? Yes, I said quietly. I'm here. And Ren? Yes. Tomorrow morning, I want you to schedule a meeting with Phoenix and Bellamy. Tell them I'm ready to come home and discuss their concerns about my living situation. Are you sure that's wise, after what I just told you? I stood up and walked to the window overlooking their backyard. In Zaria's bedroom window, I could see my granddaughter's silhouette as she sat at her desk. They think they're dealing with a confused old woman who doesn't understand what's happening to her. I said, it's time they learned exactly who they've been underestimating. Over the next 2 days, I prepared the new house with the essentials: a bed, a comfortable chair, basic kitchen supplies. I wasn't planning to live there permanently, but I needed a base of operations close to Zaria. The moving company delivered some of my belongings from my old house, carefully avoiding times when Phoenix might drive by. Each night, I watched the lights go out in my son's house, wondering what stories they were telling Zaria about my absence. Were they still pretending I was sick? Had they started suggesting I was confused, preparing her for the narrative they were building the day before our scheduled meeting? I sat with Richard in my new living room, finalizing our approach. You understand they might react badly, he cautioned. People don't like to be confronted with their own deceit. I'm counting on it, I replied. I want them to show their true colors. And what about Phoenix? He's still your son. I looked at the family photo on my side table, taken when Phoenix was graduating college. Ronan stood proud beside him, his arm around our son's shoulders. I was on Phoenix's other side, beaming at the camera. We looked so happy, so united. I lost my son the day he decided I was expendable, I said quietly. I'm hoping there's still a chance to get him back, but I'm not counting on it. Richard nodded, understanding the pain behind my words. The trust for Zaria is established. The house is in your name. Your power of attorney is registered. There's nothing they can legally do to control you or your assets. Thank you, Richard, for everything. After he left, I stood in the empty kitchen, feeling both powerful and terribly alone. I had the resources to protect myself now, but at what cost? Was I destroying what little family I had left? I pushed the doubt away. They had made their choice long before I made mine. Now they would face the consequences. I arrived at Phoenix's house at exactly 2:40 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, carrying the same worn purse I'd had for 10 years, and wearing the same modest coat that had made Bellamy wrinkle her nose at family gatherings. To them, I looked like the same helpless woman who had disappeared a week ago. They had no idea that the woman standing on their porch now owned the house next door and had $17 million in assets they couldn't touch. Phoenix opened the door before I could knock, his face a mixture of relief and barely controlled anger. Mom, thank God. Where have you been? We've been worried sick. The lie came so easily to him that I almost felt sorry for the man he'd become. I needed some time to think, I said simply, stepping into the foyer. The house still smelled like Bellamy's expensive perfume and the fresh flowers she bought weekly to maintain appearances. Bellamy appeared from the living room, her smile as artificial as her highlighted hair. Marcella, we were so frightened something had happened to you. You can't just disappear like that without telling anyone. I'm 66 years old. Bellamy, I don't need permission to leave my own house. Her smile faltered slightly. Of course not. We just worry about you living alone at your age. Zaria came running down the stairs, launching herself into my arms. Grandma, I missed you so much. Mommy said you were sick. I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. I'm not sick, sweetheart. I'm perfectly fine. Over Zaria's head, I saw Bellamy and Phoenix exchange a look. Their first lie had already been exposed. Zaria, why don't you go play in your room while the adults talk? Bellamy said, her voice tighter now. Can I stay with Grandma? No, sweetheart, I said gently. I need to talk to your parents alone, but I'll come say goodbye before I leave. After Zaria reluctantly went upstairs, the three of us sat in the living room. I chose Ronan's old recliner, the one Phoenix had moved here after his father's death. It felt appropriate somehow, having Ronan's presence for what was about to unfold. Mom, Phoenix began, leaning forward with his hands clasped. We need to discuss your living situation. Bellamy and I have been researching some really nice facilities where you'd have people around, activities, medical care if you need it. You mean nursing homes? Bellamy stepped in smoothly. Assisted living communities, places designed for active seniors who want to maintain their independence while having support available. I pulled Wren's investigation report from my purse and set it on the coffee table. You mean places like Sunset Manor, the one with the health code violations, or perhaps Golden Years Care, where the state found evidence of patient neglect? Both of them stared at the document. Phoenix reached for it, but I held up my hand. Don't touch that yet. We have other things to discuss first. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, setting it on the table between us. I want to make sure we're all clear about what's being discussed here. Mom, you don't need to record, Phoenix started. Actually, I do. You see, I know about your financial situation. I know you owe over $200,000 in various debts. I know you've been researching nursing homes for 6 months, not 5 days. And I know you've already spoken to a lawyer about having me declared incompetent. The color drained from Bellamy's face. Phoenix's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. How do you, Bellamy began. How do I know? Because unlike what you apparently think, I'm not a senile old woman who can be easily manipulated. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a business card. Wren Blackwood, private investigator. Very thorough work. Phoenix found his voice. You hired a private investigator, Mom. That's paranoid behavior. Maybe we should have Dr. Patterson take a look at you. I laughed, a sound that seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet room. Paranoid Phoenix, your wife met with an elder care attorney yesterday to discuss having me committed against my will. I'd say my paranoia was perfectly justified. Bellamy shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help you, and you're treating us like criminals. Sit down, Bellamy. Something in my tone must have surprised her because she actually obeyed. Now, I continued, let's talk about what you really want. You want to sell my house to pay off your debts? You want me out of the way so you can access what you think is my only asset. That's not, Phoenix began. I held up my hand again. I'm not finished. You've been lying to Zaria, telling her I'm sick when I'm perfectly healthy. You've been spreading rumors in the neighborhood about my mental state. And you've been planning to put me in the cheapest facility you could find while you profit from my property. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. But here's what you don't know, I said. Reaching into my purse one final time, I pulled out Ronan's notebook and my bank statements. You don't know who you've really been planning to destroy. I opened the notebook to the first page and began reading aloud. Patent number 8745321, automatic pet feeding system, filed by Ronan Thorne, March 15, 2003. Current annual royalties, $847,000. Phoenix's eyes widened. What are you talking about? I turned the page. Patent number 9564982. Programmable medication dispenser. Filed by Ronan Thorne, August 20, 2008. Current annual royalties, $623,000. Mom, I don't understand. Patent number 9834771. Smart irrigation controller. Filed by Ronan Thorne, January 4th, 2011. Current annual royalties, $891,000. I closed the notebook and opened my bank statement, turning it so they could see the bottom line. Current total assets, $17,200,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Bellamy's face had gone completely white. Phoenix stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "That's impossible," Bellamy whispered. "You live in that tiny house. You clip coupons. You buy generic groceries." "I live modestly because your father asked me to," I said, looking at Phoenix. "He wanted you to build your own success without relying on family money. He wanted to see what kind of man his son would become." I looked directly at Phoenix. "Now I know." "Mom, if this is real, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let us struggle when you could have helped?" "I did help. The $50,000 you think came from your father's life insurance for your house down payment. That was me, the inheritance you received when your grandmother died. Also me. I've been quietly supporting you for years, hoping you'd develop the character to handle real responsibility." Bellamy finally found her voice. "If you're so wealthy, then why are you living like a pauper? Because wealth without wisdom is meaningless. Your father understood that. Unfortunately, neither of you do." I stood up, gathering my papers. "Here's what's going to happen. I've purchased the house next door to you. I'll be moving in next week." "You what?" Phoenix's voice cracked. "I'll be close enough to maintain a relationship with Zaria, regardless of your wishes. I've also established a $5 million trust fund for her education and future, which neither of you can touch." Bellamy looked like she might faint. $5 million. As for the two of you," I continued, "you have a choice. You can apologize for your behavior, commit to being better parents to Zaria, and perhaps we can rebuild some kind of relationship. Or you can continue down this path, in which case you'll discover that people with $17 million have very good lawyers." Phoenix stood up, his hands shaking. "Mom, we made a mistake. We were desperate. We didn't know what else to do. If we'd known about Dad's money, if you'd known about the money, you would have been hovering around me for years, waiting for me to die so you could inherit, just like you're doing now, except you were planning to speed up the process." Bellamy's composure finally snapped. "This is insane. You can't just buy the house next door and spy on us. We have rights as parents." "Yes, you do. And I have rights as a grandmother. I also have the resources to protect those rights, which you apparently forgot when you were planning to have me declared incompetent." I moved toward the stairs. "I'm going to say goodbye to Zaria now. And Bellamy." She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "If you ever lie to her about me again, if you ever try to poison her against me the way you've poisoned Phoenix, you'll discover that $17 million can buy a lot of legal trouble for people who threaten my granddaughter's well-being." I climbed the stairs, leaving them sitting in their living room, surrounded by the wreckage of their assumptions about the helpless old woman they'd tried to discard. Zaria was in her room, coloring at her desk. She looked up when I knocked on her door frame. "Grandma, are you leaving again?" I sat on her bed and patted the space beside me. She climbed up and snuggled against my side. "I'm not leaving, sweetheart. I'm moving into the house right next door so I can see you whenever you want." Her eyes lit up. "Really, the pretty house with the big porch? Really?" And Zaria, "Yes. If your parents ever tell you that Grandma is sick or confused or can't take care of herself, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that Grandma is perfectly fine and will always be here for you." She nodded seriously. "I'll remember." "Good girl. Now, I need to go take care of some moving arrangements, but I'll see you very soon." As I walked back downstairs, I could hear urgent whispers from the living room. Phoenix and Bellamy were hunched over her laptop, probably researching whether what I'd told them was even possible. They were about to learn that it was not only possible, but that their attempt to control me had backfired in ways they couldn't have imagined. I let myself out without saying goodbye to them. They had a lot to think about, and I had a new life to begin. Instead of returning to the hotel, I drove straight to my new house. I needed time to process what had just happened. The confrontation had gone exactly as I'd planned, but I hadn't anticipated the hollow feeling that would follow. I'd won the battle, but at what cost? I sat on the front porch of my new home, watching the sunset paint the neighborhood in shades of gold and amber. Across the yard, I could see the lights on in Phoenix's house, shadows moving behind the curtains. Were they arguing? Planning, trying to find a way to salvage their financial situation? My phone rang. Richard. How did it go? Exactly as expected. They were shocked, then defensive, then desperate. And how are you feeling? I paused, considering the question. Vindicated, sad, relieved, all of the above. That's understandable. This isn't how any mother dreams of relating to her child. No, it's not. But it's what they chose. What's your next move? I watched as Zaria's bedroom light went on. Her small silhouette appeared at the window, and I could see her scanning the yard, looking toward my new house. I raised my hand and waved. After a moment, she waved back enthusiastically. My next move is to be the grandmother Zaria deserves, and to let Phoenix and Bellamy decide what kind of people they want to be. And if they choose poorly, then they'll lose everything that matters, and it won't be because I took it away. It will be because they threw it away. After we hung up, I sat on the porch until the night air grew chilly. The lights in Phoenix's house went out one by one until only Zaria's remained. I watched as she drew the curtains, and then, a few minutes later, her light too went dark. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Phoenix and Bellamy might fight back, might try to restrict my access to Zaria, might spread more lies about my mental state. But they would be fighting against resources they couldn't imagine, against a woman they had grossly underestimated, and against the truth that would eventually become clear to everyone who mattered. I went inside and locked the door to my new home. In the empty living room, I opened Ronan's notebook one more time, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting. You were right, Ronan, I whispered. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. 3 months had passed since the confrontation in Phoenix's living room. The seasons had changed, and the maple trees between our houses were now ablaze with autumn colors. I'd settled into my new home, turning it into a sanctuary not just for myself, but for Zaria. Every day after school, she would race across the yard, her backpack bouncing, and burst through my back door without knocking. Grandma, I'm here. The joy in her voice was a balm for all the pain of the past months. We'd planted a garden together in the backyard, something I'd never had time for when I was working so hard to maintain the illusion of financial struggle. Tomatoes, peppers, and an assortment of herbs grew in neat rows, with small stones painted by Zaria marking each plant. Mrs. Thorne. Wren Blackwood stood in my kitchen doorway, her expression grave. I'd kept her on retainer, monitoring the situation with Phoenix and Bellamy. Their reactions had been unpredictable at best. What is it? I asked, setting down the cookie dough I was mixing with Zaria. Can we speak privately? I nodded to Zaria. Sweetheart, why don't you go pick some tomatoes for dinner? The ripe ones only, remember? Yes, Grandma. She skipped outside, proud of her new responsibility. Wren set a file on the kitchen counter. Bellamy has filed a petition with the family court to restrict your access to Zaria. The wooden spoon in my hand snapped in two. On what grounds? She's claiming you're exhibiting inappropriate interference in their parenting, that you're undermining their authority and confusing Zaria with contradictory instructions. That's absurd. It gets worse. She's claiming that your sudden wealth and purchase of the house next door demonstrate erratic behavior consistent with the onset of cognitive decline. I laughed bitterly. So she's still pushing that narrative. Phoenix's signature is on the petition too. That stung more than I wanted to admit. Despite everything, I'd hoped my son might eventually see through Bellamy's manipulations. When is the hearing? 2 weeks from today. I've already alerted Richard. He's preparing a response. Through the window, I could see Zaria carefully selecting tomatoes, her small face scrunched in concentration. The thought of being separated from her made my chest ache. What about Zaria? Has she shown any signs of distress? Ren hesitated. She's been asking her teacher if she can call you during school hours. She seems anxious when she can't see you for a full day. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. This was exactly what I'd feared, that my conflict with Phoenix and Bellamy would affect Zaria's emotional well-being. Is there anything else I should know? Phoenix has been working extra shifts at the engineering firm. Bellamy has been spending more time at home, which is unusual for her, and they've listed their house for sale. They're planning to move to take Zaria away. It's possible. The listing price is significantly above market value, suggesting they're still desperate for cash. I looked at the broken spoon in my hand. They never learn, do they? One more thing, Ren said, pulling a photograph from the file. This was taken yesterday at Bellamy's lawyer's office. The photo showed Bellamy speaking with a man I didn't recognize. Who is that, Dr. Neville Harrington? He's a geriatric psychiatrist who frequently testifies in competency hearings. My blood ran cold. They're still trying to have me declared incompetent. It appears so. Zaria came bounding back inside, her small hands carefully cradling 5 perfectly ripe tomatoes. Look, Grandma, I found the best ones. I forced a smile, tucking away my fear and anger. Those are perfect, sweetheart, just perfect. After Ren left, I finished baking cookies with Zaria, maintaining a cheerful facade while my mind raced with contingency plans. When Phoenix arrived to pick her up, he barely made eye contact with me. Did you have fun with Grandma? He asked Zaria mechanically. Yes, we made cookies and I picked tomatoes, and Grandma showed me how to make a bird feeder. Phoenix nodded, his eyes darting around my kitchen, probably noting the new appliances and quality furnishings, further evidence of the wealth I'd kept hidden. Time to go home, kiddo. Mom's waiting. Can I come back tomorrow, Daddy? Please? A flash of something, guilt conflict, crossed his face. We'll see. You have a play date with Emma tomorrow. Remember, Zaria's face fell. But I was here yesterday when Emma called. We didn't make a play date. Phoenix flushed. Well, Mom must have arranged it today. Come on, let's go. As they left, Zaria turned back to wave, her expression troubled. She knew something wasn't right, even if she couldn't articulate what. I watched them cross the yard, my granddaughter skipping ahead while my son walked with slumped shoulders. For the first time, I wondered if Phoenix was as much a victim of Bellamy's machinations as I had been. But then I remembered his signature on the court petition. He'd made his choice. That evening, I called Richard to discuss our strategy for the upcoming hearing. They're going to paint you as unstable, he warned. The sudden revelation of wealth, buying the house next door, they'll twist it to make you seem irrational. Can they succeed? Normally, I'd say no chance, but family court judges are concerned primarily with the child's welfare. If they can create enough doubt about your stability, the judge might err on the side of caution. So what do? We demonstrate that you're not only stable, but that your presence is beneficial to Zaria. We show her academic improvements since you've been next door. We present evidence of the healthy activities and routines you've established, and we counter their narrative about your mental state with an evaluation from our own expert. I nodded, though he couldn't see me through the phone. Set it up, whatever it takes. After we hung up, I walked through my new house, touching the furniture, the walls, the photographs I'd carefully arranged. This place had become my fortress, my watchtower from which I could protect Zaria. I would not let Bellamy take that away. Through the window, I could see Phoenix and Bellamy arguing in their kitchen. Their gestures were animated, faces contorted with emotion, and standing in the doorway, watching with wide eyes, was Zaria. My heart broke for her, caught in the crossfire of adult battles she couldn't understand. That night, I made a decision. If Phoenix and Bellamy wanted a fight, they would get one, but it would be on my terms. The family courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate and somehow more intimidating because of it. I sat beside Richard at one table, while Phoenix, Bellamy, and their lawyer occupied the other. Zaria was absent, waiting with a court-appointed advocate in another room. Judge Eleanor Ramirez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the documents before her, occasionally glancing up at our tables with an inscrutable expression. "Before we begin," she said finally, "I want to be clear that my only concern is the welfare of the child. I'm not interested in family feuds, financial disputes, or personal vendettas. Is that understood?" We all nodded. "Good. Mrs. Vance Thorne, since you've brought this petition, your counsel may proceed." Bellamy's lawyer, a slick-looking man named Martin Graves, approached the bench. "Your Honor, this case is about a grandmother who, after displaying increasingly erratic behavior, has taken extraordinary and disturbing steps to insert herself into my client's family life." He outlined their case with practiced precision: my mysterious disappearance for a week, the shocking revelation of hidden wealth, the stalker-like behavior of purchasing the house next door, and my inappropriate undermining of their parental authority. Most concerning, he concluded, is Mrs. Thorne's apparent cognitive decline, manifesting as paranoia and delusions about her son and daughter-in-law's intentions. I maintained a calm exterior, but inside I was seething. The way they'd twisted every action, every decision I'd made to protect myself and Zaria, into evidence of mental instability was breathtakingly manipulative. When Richard's turn came, he approached with the quiet confidence that had made him one of the city's most respected attorneys. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of an unstable grandmother, but of parents who tried to institutionalize Mrs. Thorne against her will in order to gain control of her assets." He methodically dismantled their narrative, presenting Wren's investigation report, the documented evidence of their nursing home research, and transcripts of conversations where they discussed having me declared incompetent. Mrs. Thorne didn't disappear. She removed herself from a toxic and potentially dangerous situation. She didn't suddenly reveal her wealth. She demonstrated that she wasn't the helpless financial burden they had characterized her as. And she didn't buy the house next door to stalk them. She secured a residence that would allow her to maintain a relationship with her granddaughter despite their attempts to separate them. Judge Ramirez listened intently, her expression giving nothing away. When Richard finished, she called for the first witness, Dr. Harrington, Bellamy's psychiatric expert. The doctor testified that, based on his review of my behavior patterns, though he'd never actually met me, I was displaying signs consistent with early-stage dementia, particularly paranoid ideation and impulsive decision-making. During cross-examination, Richard was merciless. "Dr. Harrington, how many times have you personally examined Mrs. Thorne?" "I haven't examined her directly, but yes or no, doctor." "Have you examined her?" "No, but I've reviewed extensive documentation." "Documentation provided solely by the petitioners, correct?" "Yes, but..." "And in the past 3 years, How many times have you testified in competency hearings? I don't keep an exact count. Would 47 times be accurate, according to court records? Dr. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. That sounds possible. And in how many of those cases did you find the subject competent? A long pause. 3. 3 out of 47. That's quite a record. Doctor. No further questions. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand with my head high. I would not let them see my fear. Bellamy's lawyer tried to portray me as unstable, focusing on my secretive behavior and sudden financial decisions. I remained calm, answering each question directly and honestly. Mrs. Thorne, why did you conceal your wealth from your own son? My husband and I wanted Phoenix to develop independence and character without relying on family money. We believed that knowing about our wealth might impede his growth as a person. And you didn't think he deserved to know the truth after his father died. My husband specifically asked me to continue our approach until Phoenix demonstrated the wisdom to handle such responsibility. And you were the sole judge of that wisdom. Yes, as was my husband's wish. Isn't it true that you only revealed your wealth when you felt threatened, that this was about power, not principle? I met his gaze steadily. I revealed my wealth when I discovered that my son and his wife were planning to have me institutionalized against my will in order to sell my house. I would call that self-preservation, not power. The questioning continued for nearly an hour. Then it was Phoenix's turn to testify. I watched my son take the stand, noting how tired he looked, how the confidence he once carried had been replaced by a wary defensiveness. Mr. Thorne, Bellamy's lawyer began, can you describe your mother's behavior in the months leading up to her disappearance? Phoenix glanced at me, then quickly away. She seemed normal, I guess, maybe a bit more forgetful than usual. Can you provide examples of this forgetfulness? Phoenix shifted uncomfortably. She would sometimes repeat stories, or forget appointments we'd made. Did these memory issues concern you? Bellamy was more concerned than I was. Initially, she noticed things I didn't. And what did your wife observe? She said Mom seemed confused sometimes, about dates, about conversations we'd had. I clenched my fists under the table. These were outright lies. I had never been forgetful or confused. They were constructing a narrative from nothing. When Richard cross-examined Phoenix, his approach was gentle but persistent. Mr. Thorne, prior to your wife's concerns, had you noticed any cognitive decline in your mother? Phoenix hesitated. Not really, no. In fact, your mother has always been sharp, organized, and independent. Hasn't she? Yes. She raised you as a single mother after your father's death, managed the household finances, and maintained her home impeccably, correct? Yes. Mr. Thorne, I have here your mother's medical records for the past 5 years. Regular checkups, clean bills of health, and no concerns noted by her physician about her cognitive function. Are you aware of these records? No, I haven't seen those. Did you or your wife ever accompany your mother to a doctor's appointment to discuss these supposed memory issues? No. Did you suggest she see a doctor? Bellamy thought it would upset her. So, instead of seeking medical advice, you and your wife began researching nursing homes. Is that correct? Phoenix's face flushed. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Mr. Thorne? My son looked at me directly for the first time that day. In his eyes, I saw confusion, shame, and something else, a flicker of the boy I'd raised. I don't know anymore, he said quietly. I don't know what's true. The final witness was Zaria's court-appointed advocate, a gentle-voiced woman named Ms. Rivera, who had spent time with Zaria evaluating her home life and her relationship with me. Zaria Thorne is a bright, articulate child who expresses clear preferences and observations. Ms. Rivera testified. She describes her relationship with her grandmother as nurturing, consistent, and emotionally supportive. In her words, Grandma listens to me and makes me feel important. And her relationship with her parents, Richard asked, more complex. She describes her father as busy and tired a lot. Her mother is characterized as always on the phone and sometimes angry for no reason. Zaria mentioned feeling invisible at home unless she does something wrong. Bellamy made a small, indignant sound. Phoenix stared at the table. Does Zaria express any concerns about spending time with her grandmother? On the contrary, she becomes visibly animated when discussing their activities together. Gardening, baking, reading, art projects, all developmentally appropriate and enriching experiences. Her only expressed concern is that she might not be allowed to see her grandmother as often. When all testimony concluded, Judge Ramirez called a brief recess. As we waited for her return, I watched Phoenix and Bellamy across the room. They weren't speaking to each other. Bellamy was furiously texting on her phone while Phoenix stared into space, his expression hollow. Judge Ramirez returned with her ruling 30 minutes later. Having considered all testimony and evidence presented, I find the petitioner's claims regarding Mrs. Thorne's mental competency to be without merit. There is no credible evidence of cognitive decline or inappropriate behavior on her part. Bellamy's face hardened. Phoenix closed his eyes. Regarding visitation with the minor child, Zaria Thorne, I find that the grandmother's presence is beneficial and contributes positively to the child's emotional well-being. Therefore, I am denying the petition to restrict access. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me. Furthermore, Judge Ramirez continued, I am concerned by the testimony regarding the child's home environment. I am ordering a full family assessment to be conducted over the next 30 days, with follow-up hearings as necessary. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. As we gathered our papers, Richard leaned close. That was a complete victory, Marcella. And the family assessment that's going to put Phoenix and Bellamy under the microscope. I nodded, but took no joy in the win. Across the room, Bellamy was berating their lawyer while Phoenix stood apart, looking lost. This wasn't what I had wanted. I'd sought protection, not destruction. Richard, I said quietly, what happens now? He followed my gaze to my son. That depends on them, and on you. In the weeks following the court hearing, a strange new rhythm developed. Zaria spent every afternoon with me, arriving the moment school ended and staying until dinner. Phoenix would collect her silently, exchange minimal pleasantries, and disappear back into his house. Bellamy never came to my door. Through Zaria and my occasional glimpses through windows, I pieced together the deteriorating situation next door. Phoenix and Bellamy were barely speaking. They slept in separate rooms. Bellamy had taken to leaving the house for hours, sometimes entire days, without explanation. Daddy's sad all the time, Zaria confided one afternoon as we kneaded bread dough together. And Mommy's always angry. I'm sorry to hear that, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That must be hard for you. She nodded, her small hands working the dough with surprising strength. Daddy sits in his office looking at papers and sighing. Mommy yells at him about money. I try to be very quiet so they don't remember I'm there. My heart ached. You know none of this is your fault, right? I know. She pressed her fingertip into the dough, making a small indentation. Daddy told me that. He said adults sometimes have big problems that make them act differently, but it's never because of me. I was surprised and somewhat relieved to hear Phoenix had made that effort. Your daddy's right about that. Grandma, Zaria looked up at me, flour dusting her cheeks. Are you and Daddy fighting? I paused, considering how to answer honestly without burdening her. Your daddy and I have some disagreements right now, but we both love you very much. That will never change. She seemed to accept this, returning her attention to the dough, but a moment later, she added, Daddy misses you. I heard him tell Mommy that he made a big mistake. Before I could process this, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands and went to answer it, surprised to find Phoenix standing there, hours before the usual pickup time. Mom, he said, his voice rough. Can we talk? I glanced back at Zaria, happily playing with the dough. Come in, she's in the kitchen. Phoenix stepped inside, his eyes taking in the home I'd created. Photos of Zaria and me lined the walls, along with older pictures of Phoenix as a child and a few of Ronan. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth, just a comfortable, lived-in space filled with love. Hi, Daddy, Zaria called. We're making bread. Want to help? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Maybe next time, kiddo. I need to talk to Grandma for a few minutes. Is that okay? She nodded, returning to her dough shaping with the intense concentration only children can muster. I led Phoenix to the living room, far enough away that Zaria wouldn't overhear, but where I could still keep an eye on her. What is it? I asked, not unkindly. Phoenix ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my chest tighten. I'm sorry, he said simply. I'm so sorry, Mom. I hadn't expected this. I'd prepared for more accusations, for renewed attempts to control me or limit my time with Zaria, not an apology. For what, specifically, I needed to hear him say it. For everything. For believing Bellamy's version of events without question. For not standing up for you. For being willing to. He swallowed hard. To put you in a facility against your will. God, when I say it out loud, I can't believe I went along with it. I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. I saw only exhaustion and genuine remorse. What changed? I asked. The court hearing our plan laid out like that, seeing the evidence that Bellamy had been planning it for months, listening to what Zaria told her advocate about feeling invisible at home. His voice broke. And watching you, you weren't angry or vindictive. You were just, Mom, the same strong, principled woman who raised me. He looked down at his hands. I kept thinking about what Dad would say if he could see what I'd become, how disappointed he'd be. Your father always believed in your potential, Phoenix, even at the end. That almost makes it worse. He met my gaze, his eyes damp. I've made such a mess of everything. My marriage is falling apart. I'm drowning in debt. I've betrayed my mother and failed my daughter. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay. But platitudes wouldn't help either of us. What are you going to do about it? I asked instead. He seemed surprised by the question. I don't know. Bellamy's talking about divorce. Says this isn't what she signed up for. And Zaria? She's the only thing keeping me going. His voice strengthened. I won't fail her again. Whatever happens with Bellamy, I'm going to be the father Zaria deserves. I nodded, allowing myself to feel a cautious hope. That's a start. Mom, there's something else. Phoenix looked nervous now. Bellamy took money from Zaria's college fund, about $30,000. She said it was for an investment opportunity, but I found receipts for jewelry, spa treatments, a weekend in Vegas. My anger flared. When, last month, before the hearing, I confronted her last night. He touched his cheek, and I noticed for the first time a faint bruise forming. She didn't take it well. That explained the separate bedrooms, the extended absences. Bellamy was preparing her exit strategy. Phoenix, listen to me carefully. I believe you're sincere right now, but trust needs to be rebuilt over time, not in a single conversation. I know, I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. It's not just about forgiveness, it's about protection for Zaria, for yourself, and yes, for me too. If Bellamy is willing to steal from her own daughter's future, what else might she do when cornered? He nodded slowly. What should I do? Document everything, secure your important papers, and most importantly, make sure Zaria is never left alone with Bellamy if she's in one of her moods. You think she would hurt Zaria? The horror in his voice was genuine. I don't know, but I wouldn't risk it. I softened my tone. Phoenix, you're still my son. Despite everything, I want to help you find your way back to the man I know you can be. But I need to see consistent actions, not just words. I understand. He stood up, looking slightly steadier than when he'd arrived. Thank you for listening. I didn't deserve that. No, you didn't. I agreed. But Zaria deserves to have her father and grandmother working together for her benefit. As if summoned by her name, Zaria appeared in the doorway, her hands and face dusted with flour. The bread is ready to bake. Grandma, I'll be right there, sweetheart. Phoenix knelt down to her level. That bread looks like it's going to be delicious. Save some for me. You can stay for dinner, Zaria suggested eagerly. Right, Grandma? I hesitated, then nodded. If your daddy wants to. I'd like that, Phoenix said softly. I'd like that very much. The calm after the court hearing lasted exactly 17 days. On the 18th day, everything exploded. I was in my garden harvesting the last of the season's tomatoes when I heard the screaming from next door. Glass shattered. A door slammed. Then Phoenix's voice, louder than I'd ever heard it. Where is it? What have you done with it? I dropped my basket and ran toward their house. Before I reached it, the front door flew open and Bellamy stormed out, designer suitcase in hand, face contorted with rage. She spotted me and changed direction, marching straight toward me. You, she spat. You've ruined everything. Bellamy, what's going on? Where's Zaria? Like you care. All you wanted was to turn him against me. Well, congratulations. You won. Behind her, Phoenix appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. Bellamy, stop. We need to talk about this. She whirled to face him. There's nothing to talk about. You chose your mother over me. You chose a child who isn't even yours over me. The words hung in the air like poison. Phoenix staggered as if physically struck. What did you say? His voice was barely audible. Bellamy's laugh was cruel and brittle. A heckle. Oh, did I forget to mention that Zaria isn't yours? Phoenix never was. Do the math. Those business trips I took during the first year of our marriage, I wasn't alone. I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Zaria, my beautiful, bright-eyed granddaughter, not Phoenix's biological child. I looked at my son, watching his world collapse for the second time in as many months. You're lying, he whispered. You're just saying that to hurt me. Why would I lie now? It's all over anyway. She tossed her hair back. Check her blood type if you don't believe me. Or better yet, get a DNA test. Modern science is so convenient. Where is she? I demanded, finding my voice. Where is Zaria? At school. Where else? Not that it matters to me anymore. She was always just a means to an end. Your precious son's bank account. Bellamy's smile was chilling. Although I did manage to secure a little nest egg for myself from your accounts. Phoenix. The wire transfer just cleared this morning. What are you talking about? Phoenix looked confused, then horrified. The emergency fund, that was every penny we had left. Correction, every penny you had left. Consider it my severance package. She checked her watch. My flight leaves in 2 hours, so this is goodbye. Don't bother with lawyers. I'll be out of the country before they can file the paperwork. She turned to me, her mask of sophistication completely gone, revealing the callous manipulator beneath. And you, old woman, so smug with your millions, so righteous, you think you've won. But look at what's left of your son. Look at the child who isn't even your blood. Was it worth it? Before I could respond, she strode to the waiting taxi I hadn't even noticed pull up. As it drove away, Phoenix sank to his knees on the front lawn, his face blank with shock. I hurried to his side. Phoenix, Phoenix, look at me. His eyes were unfocused. It was all a lie. Everything was a lie. Not everything. Not Zaria's love for you. I gripped his shoulders. Phoenix, we need to act quickly. What accounts did Bellamy have access to? The practical question seemed to anchor him. Joint checking and savings. The emergency fund was about $40,000, everything we had left after the debts. Call the bank immediately. Report the transfer as fraudulent. Then call Richard. We need to freeze any other assets she might access. He nodded mechanically, pulling out his phone. And Phoenix Zaria gets out of school in an hour. We need to make sure Bellamy can't get to her. That galvanized him. She wouldn't. We don't know what she would do. Let's not take chances. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Phoenix called the bank, but it was too late to stop the transfer. Richard promised to seek an emergency court order to freeze any remaining assets. I called the school, explaining there was a family emergency and only Phoenix or I were authorized to pick up Zaria. We arrived at the school 20 minutes early, parking where we could watch every entrance. Phoenix was silent, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. What am I going to tell her? He finally asked. How do I explain that her mother just left the truth, but only as much as she needs right now, that mommy and daddy are having problems and mommy needed some time away? And the rest of it about her not being. He couldn't finish the sentence. That's a conversation for another day, with professional guidance. Right now, she needs stability and reassurance that she's loved. Phoenix turned to me, his eyes haunted. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough? I covered his hand with mine. You are your father's son, Phoenix and mine. You have strength you haven't even discovered yet. The school bell rang, and children began pouring out of the building. We spotted Zaria immediately, her purple backpack bouncing as she scanned the pickup area. When she saw us both waiting, her face lit up with surprise and delight. Daddy, Grandma! She ran to us, wrapping an arm around each of our legs. Are we doing something special today? Phoenix knelt down, his voice remarkably steady. Yes, sweetheart. Today is special because we're going to have dinner at Grandma's house. Would you like that? Yes? She looked around. Where's Mommy? Phoenix and I exchanged glances. Mommy needed to take a trip, he said carefully. She'll be away for a while. Zaria's smile dimmed slightly. Did she say goodbye to me? Phoenix swallowed hard. She had to leave quickly, but she knows you'll be safe with Daddy and Grandma. The child nodded, accepting this explanation with the resilience that only children possess. Can we have spaghetti for dinner with Grandma's special sauce? Of course we can, I said, stroking her hair. Anything you want. As we walked to the car, Zaria chattering about her day at school. I watched Phoenix's face, behind the mask of normalcy he'd put on for his daughter. I could see the devastation, the betrayal, the overwhelming uncertainty about the future, but I also saw determination and love, real, unconditional love for the child holding his hand. Biology be damned. Later that night, after Zaria was asleep in the guest room of my house, Phoenix and I sat at my kitchen table with cups of tea growing cold between us. I called the airline, he said, breaking the long silence. She was on the 5:30 flight to Zurich. One-way ticket. Switzerland. No extradition for financial crimes. She planned this for a long time, didn't she? The question was rhetorical. We both knew the answer. What will you do now? I asked. Phoenix ran his hands over his face. Yen. File for divorce, sole custody, try to rebuild some kind of life for Zaria and me. You still want custody, even knowing what Bellamy said might be true. He looked up sharply. She is my daughter in every way that matters. I've been there for every skinned knee, every nightmare, every lost tooth. I'm the one who taught her to ride a bike and read her bedtime stories and helped her with her homework. DNA doesn't make a father. Love does. Tears pricked my eyes. In that moment, I saw Ronan in him so clearly. The same unshakable moral center, the same capacity for selfless love. I'm proud of you, Phoenix. He looked surprised. After everything I've done, the way I treated you. You made terrible mistakes, but you're facing them with courage and integrity. That's something to be proud of. I still don't understand how I let it happen, how I became someone who could even consider institutionalizing his own mother. I reached across the table and took his hand. Bellamy is skilled at manipulation, and you were vulnerable, trying to please her, trying to maintain a family for Zaria, drowning in financial stress. That's no excuse. No, it's not. But it's a context. And now you have a chance to make different choices. Phoenix squeezed my hand. If I could go back and undo all of it, we can't go back. We can only go forward. I hesitated, then added, together, if you want. I do want that, Mom. More than anything. His voice broke. But I don't know if I deserve it. That's not for you to decide. It's for me to offer and for you to accept. A small sound from the doorway made us both turn. Zaria stood there in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since infancy. I had a bad dream, she said in a small voice. About Mommy being gone forever. Phoenix opened his arms, and she ran into them, burying her face against his chest. I'm here, sweetie. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise. And Grandma's here too. We're going to take care of you together. Zaria looked up at me, her eyes still sleepy but seeking confirmation. I moved to join their embrace, wrapping my arms around both of them. That's right, sweetheart. We're a family. Nothing will change that. As I held them, I thought about Ronan's last message in his notebook. You'll know when it's time to tell the truth. Trust your instincts. He had been right, though perhaps not in the way he'd imagined. The truth had come out, painful and messy, but necessary. And from that difficult truth, something genuine was emerging, a chance to rebuild our family on a foundation of honesty instead of illusion. Phoenix and Zaria moved into my house the next day. Their home, still filled with Bellamy's belongings and the remnants of a life built on deception, felt toxic to all of us. We needed a fresh start, a clean break from the past. The following weeks brought one revelation after another. The emergency fund wasn't the only thing Bellamy had taken. She'd opened credit cards in Phoenix's name, run up massive debts, and even taken out a third mortgage on their house without his knowledge. His credit was destroyed, his finances in ruins. She forged my signature, Phoenix said, staring at the mortgage documents Richard had obtained. I never saw these papers before. Identity theft and fraud, Richard noted. Criminal offenses, but with her out of the country. We may never get the money back, I finished, but at least we can stop the bleeding. Phoenix shook his head. I still can't believe I was so blind. All those designer clothes, expensive vacations, jewelry, I knew we couldn't afford them, but she always had an explanation, an inheritance from an aunt, a bonus from work, a lucky investment. She was convincing, I said gently, and you wanted to believe her. I was a fool. He closed the folder of financial documents. How am I ever going to rebuild from this, one step at a time? First, we need to get you and Zaria legally protected. Richard had already filed for an emergency divorce petition citing abandonment and fraud. He'd also requested temporary full custody of Zaria, which was granted almost immediately given Bellamy's unexplained departure from the country. The DNA test was Phoenix's decision alone. I didn't ask about the results, and he didn't volunteer them. Whatever biology had to say, it couldn't change the bond between father and daughter that I witnessed every day. 2 months after Bellamy's dramatic exit, Phoenix started seeing a therapist. It was his idea, not mine, though I fully supported it. Twice a week, he would return from his sessions looking drained but somehow lighter, as if each conversation helped shed some of the burden he'd been carrying. Dr. Marshall says I need to work on my boundaries, he told me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching Zaria play in the yard. That I was susceptible to Bellamy's manipulation because I never developed a strong sense of self. That sounds insightful. She thinks it might be connected to how Dad and you kept the financial truth from me, that I grew up with a sense that I couldn't be trusted with the whole picture. I felt a pang of guilt. She might be right. Phoenix turned to me. I'm not blaming you. Mom, I understand why you and Dad made that choice. You wanted me to develop character, not dependence. But perhaps we went too far in the other direction, I admitted. By keeping you in the dark about our resources, we may have undermined your confidence in your own judgment. Maybe, or maybe I would have turned out entitled and spoiled if I'd known about the money. He smiled wryly. We'll never know. What matters is what we do now, I said. How we move forward. That's what Dr. Marshall says too. She's helping me identify patterns, set boundaries, recognize when I'm being manipulated versus when someone is being genuinely supportive. I watched Zaria doing cartwheels in the grass, her laughter floating back to us on the evening breeze. And how is she doing with all this? Better than I expected. Kids are resilient. She asks about Bellamy sometimes, but less frequently now, he sighed. She started calling her my first mom when she talks about her, as if she's already reclassified her relationship in her mind. Children often understand more than we give them credit for. They sense emotional truths even when they don't have all the facts. Phoenix nodded. She told her counselor that she always knew Mommy didn't love her the same way Daddy did, that Mommy's hugs felt like a picture of a hug, not a real one. My heart ached at the image. Even at 8 years old, Zaria had recognized the hollowness in Bellamy's affection. Phoenix, I said carefully, have you thought about what happens next, with your career, your living situation? He'd been working remotely for his engineering firm, but I knew it was a temporary arrangement born of crisis, not a long-term solution. Actually, yes. He seemed almost eager now. I've been offered a position with an environmental engineering startup. They're developing more efficient irrigation systems for drought-prone regions. That sounds perfect for you. You always had your father's passion for practical solutions to real problems. It would mean a fresh start, new company, new focus. He hesitated. But it would also mean selling the house, walking away from the mortgage debt, taking a hit on my credit that might take years to recover from. Sometimes a clean break is worth the cost. That's what I think too. He looked out at Zaria again. She deserves a home without those memories, without Bellamy's shadow hanging over everything. I took a deep breath. I've been thinking about that, about what comes next for all of us. Oh, he turned to me, curious. I'm not getting any younger. Phoenix, this house is wonderful, but it's more space than I need, and my old house still stands empty. What are you suggesting? What if we sold both houses, yours and mine, used the proceeds to pay off your debts, and then, I hesitated, suddenly uncertain if I was overstepping. What if we bought a place together? Something with enough space for all of us, plus a separate apartment or wing where I could have my independence while still being close to Zaria. Phoenix was quiet for a long moment. You do that after everything. Family supports each other, especially in difficult times. Besides, I smiled. I've grown accustomed to having you both around. I don't know what to say. You don't have to decide right now. Think about it. Talk to Dr. Marshall. See if it fits with those boundaries you're working on. He laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in far too long. I will, but my first instinct, it feels right. From the yard, Zaria called out, "Daddy, Grandma, watch me do a handstand." We both turned our attention to her, applauding as she wobbled for a few seconds upside down before tumbling onto the grass in a fit of giggles. "She's going to be okay, isn't she?" Phoenix asked softly. "Yes," I said with certainty. "She has what she needs most, people who truly love her." 6 months after the confrontation in Phoenix's living room, we gathered around my dining table for Thanksgiving dinner. The house smelled of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie, Ronan's favorite holiday menu that I prepared faithfully every year since his death. Phoenix carved the turkey with his father's old carving set, his movements confident and practiced. Zaria arranged name cards she'd made at school, proudly showing off her cursive handwriting. And seated across from me was a face I hadn't seen in years, my sister Patricia, flown in from Oregon for the holiday. "This gravy is divine, Marcella," Patricia said, helping herself to seconds. "You always were the cook in the family." "And you were always the one with all the stories," I replied, smiling. "Zaria has been waiting all day to hear about your travels." Patricia winked at Zaria. "Well, I have some doozies from my trip to New Zealand. Ever heard of glowworm caves?" As Patricia launched into her tale, complete with theatrical gestures that had Zaria giggling, I caught Phoenix's eye across the table. He looked more at peace than I'd seen him in years. The dark circles under his eyes had faded, and he'd regained some of the weight he'd lost during the crisis. The past months had brought significant changes. We'd sold both houses, mine and Phoenix's, and purchased a charming Victorian on the edge of town. It had a separate garden apartment where I lived, connected to the main house by a covered walkway. The arrangement gave us all the perfect balance of togetherness and independence. Phoenix's new job with the environmental engineering firm was demanding but fulfilling. He spoke passionately about their irrigation projects, reminding me so much of Ronan when he'd been developing his inventions. The divorce from Bellamy had been finalized in absentia. She remained in Europe, apparently living well on the money she'd taken, occasionally sending provocative social media posts that Phoenix had learned to ignore. The Swiss authorities had little interest in pursuing what they viewed as a domestic financial dispute. After dinner, while Patricia helped Zaria build a puzzle in the living room, Phoenix and I washed dishes together, a tradition we'd established in our new home. "I talked to Richard yesterday," Phoenix said, drying a serving platter. "He thinks we should update the trust documentation for Zaria, given everything that's happened." I nodded. "That makes sense. What did you have in mind?" "Actually, I wanted your input. You've made wise decisions about money for decades. I'm still learning." The simple acknowledgement, his recognition of my financial acumen, meant more than he could know. "I think we should keep the college fund as planned, but perhaps add provisions for graduate school if that's a path she chooses." "And what about—" After us, Phoenix asked carefully. Have you thought about what happens to the patents, the royalties, when we're gone? I handed him another dish. I have. I think we should establish a foundation in Ronan's name. Fund scholarships for young inventors, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Ronan would have liked that. Phoenix's eyes lit up. That's perfect. Dad was always encouraging the neighborhood kids who showed an interest in his workshop. Remember Tommy Geller? Dad helped him build that science fair project that won the state championship. I do remember. Tommy's a mechanical engineer now. I believe he is. We connected on LinkedIn a few months ago. Phoenix set down his towel. I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, about the kind of legacy he built. Not just the financial one, but the moral one. He would be proud of you, Phoenix. The way you've handled everything this year, the father you're being to Zaria, the man you're becoming. I hope so. He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I wish he could have seen Zaria grow up. He sees, I said softly, in his own way. Later that evening, after Patricia had gone to bed in the guest room and Zaria was tucked in with dreams of glowworm caves, Phoenix and I sat in the library of the main house. It had become our ritual to share a cup of tea before I returned to my apartment for the night. I have something for you, Phoenix said, reaching into the drawer of the side table. He pulled out a small, wrapped package. It's not my birthday, I protested mildly. Consider it a Thanksgiving gift. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with my initials. Open it, Phoenix urged. The first page held a handwritten message for my mother, Marcella Thorne, whose wisdom, courage, and love have shaped 3 generations of our family. This is your story, our story, to be continued for many chapters to come, with all my love and gratitude. Phoenix. The remaining pages were blank, waiting to be filled. It's beautiful, I said, running my fingers over the smooth leather. I thought you might want to record your memories, your experiences, for Zaria, and maybe someday for her children. The story of how you saved our family. I didn't save our family alone, Phoenix. We saved it together. He nodded, accepting the shared credit. Either way, it's a story worth preserving. I held the journal close, thinking of Ronan's notebook that had started this journey. How appropriate that this new chapter would begin with a blank book, ready for fresh possibilities. Thank you, I said simply, for this and for finding your way back. Thank you for not giving up on me. Phoenix leaned forward, his expression earnest. You know, Dad once told me something I didn't understand at the time. He said that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in wisdom. I think I finally know what he meant. I smiled, remembering Ronan's words in his notebook. Money without wisdom is just another burden. Your father was a very wise man. He married a very wise woman. Phoenix stood, stretching. I should let you get some rest. Big day tomorrow with the holiday parade and all. As I walked back to my apartment through the covered walkway, I felt a sense of completion, of rightness that had been missing for so long. The fortune Ronan had built was finally serving its true purpose, not just providing financial security, but fostering the values he'd held most dear: integrity, compassion, and family. In my apartment, I settled into my favorite chair and opened the new journal. The blank pages seemed to hold infinite possibilities. I picked up a pen and began to write. This is the story of a fortune hidden and revealed, not the fortune of patents and investments, though that played its part, but the true fortune of our family, the strength to face difficult truths, the courage to begin again, and the wisdom to recognize what truly matters. Outside my window, the moon cast silver light across the garden that Zaria and I had planted together. Tomorrow we would add spring bulbs, tulips and daffodils that would bloom long after winter's chill had passed. A promise of renewal, of beauty yet to come. Like our family, I thought, weathering the harshest season only to emerge stronger, more vibrant, more authentic than before. I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for following my story to the end. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen two other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you.